with rates going down when inflation is going up. You can't do it. They don't show up. And, we're handing money under the table, Chris, to England, to Belgium, and to Ireland. We're handing money under the table for them to show up and buy our bonds. And it's not showing up on the tick report because they're giving it right back under the table and it's going to the Fed balance sheet. Before I get to my list, I'm going to talk to you briefly about what I call a paradox. Foreigners are selling treasury bonds at a record rate. We've got a tremendous amount of supply of bonds. The Department of Treasury is obligated to buy back the bonds. And the Fed is where they put the bonds. So how's the Fed reducing their balance sheet? They're not. They're lying. Or we're tapping the exchange stabilization fund. And let's just leave that for a future date to discuss. Foreigners are selling a huge amount of treasuries. The government's got to buy it, the Treasury Department. They put it on the Fed balance sheet. We got a tremendous amount of bond supply to sell. They're unsuccessful auctions, which means we put a lot on the balance sheet after monetizing them. So how's the Fed reducing their balance sheet?
Well, okay. Jim, one question about that is similar to what we talked last time about with the some of the foreign holdings. Would the Fed's balance sheet be going down also just partially in response to the loss in value of some of the assets they hold? So not necessarily from when we look from the top to the bottom where we are now, and I'll pull up that chart. But would there also be some of that is accounted for by the loss in value of the securities under the higher rates?
I think they sold a lot of corporate bonds and mortgage bonds. If I had a similar chart showing mortgage bonds owned by the Fed, and it was down 200 billion from peak. So they've got corporate bonds, they got mortgage bonds, they got treasury bonds. They're not all the same. Okay. Part of this paradox is if the Fed is actually selling bonds, who the hell is buying them? I'm telling you right now, and I don't want to get into this deeper, I believe they're tapping the exchange stabilization fund. Okay? Rob Kirby thought that it had 15 to 20 trillion in it. I told Rob that I yield to him because, I'm using my emotional IQ. I'm a team builder. Rob is a better bank analyst than I ever was, or he was than I ever will be, because he was murdered by remdesivir. I told him I thought there were 8 to 10 trillion in the exchange stabilization fund, and we never gave back the Saudis their huge chunk that they asked for 6 years ago. As I said, I don't want to get into the exchange stabilization fund. It's a big topic. I believe that we're tapping it, and it's to buy time. And I also believe the White Alliance has captured Wall Street, which means they captured the New York Fed, which means they control the exchange stabilization fund. That's run by the New York Fed. Okay, I'd like to get to my list at kind of a conclusion, crescendo. And I need my glasses because I'm no longer a young man. But, if you see me on a bicycle or you see me in horizontal exercises, I'm actually quite strong. We have number one, the government debt default and treasury bond default. Number two, monetization of the debt for all unsold and refunded treasury bonds. Number three, a constant status of higher price inflation because we're not fixing anything. And this is a supply chain based inflation. Number four, grand global wealth transfer, treasuries to gold by numerous countries. Number five, Bank depositors, like, people who have got a lot of money. They're taking money out of the bank and they're buying gold. Number 6, the BRICS nations are creating non-dollar payment systems. They're all de-dollarizing. And that means they're dumping treasuries. When you dump the treasuries, you get a gold push, you get a gold stimulus. Number 7, the resentment over dollar weaponization. It gets mentioned, dollar weaponization, but it doesn't get talked about, Chris, for the consequences. The consequences are, if you're being weaponized, if you're being a victim of a weaponization, you're going to want to get rid of what they're using to weaponize. So you sell the dollar, you buy gold. Number 8.
Jim?
Yeah.
One quick note on what you just mentioned there that I don't know if a lot of people have seen. You probably did, but this was a story last week that the U.S. is now looking at sanctioning Chinese banks if they aid Russia's war machine, according to Janet Yellen. So obviously would just further exacerbate point number 7 if this were something that did end up happening.
Well, I read things like that, and my immediate reaction is that the United States is going to become isolated with even more nations. They basically patted her on the head and kicked her out of the country. And notice that when Yellen was in China, urging them to produce fewer electric vehicles, urging them to buy less silver, urging them to buy less gold, the gold market went up and the silver market went up, and it was a gigantic FU. So it's almost a non-story. All right, I'm going to continue. Number 8. There's a hidden agenda by the central banks, and this was expressed in the 1990 decade by a former Basel BIS chairman named Zielstra. Zielstra said in the 1990 decade that in the next couple of decades, the Rothschild central banks are going to face intolerable insolvency, and the only way out will be for them to load up on gold in secrecy and send the gold price to $3,000, $5,000, and then $10,000. The central banks will do it to get out of insolvency. And the follow-on effect of that is, if they don't, they're going to become irrelevant. They're not going to become irrelevant, so they're going to buy gold. Number 9, the inflationary depression in the United States is becoming more and more evident. Falsified economic statistics. We've got now like 5 or 6 categories for price inflation, and they're all double the official aggregate stated price inflation. They're saying it's 3, 4, 5%. We've got numerous items that are 8, 10%. Okay, not believed. Inflationary depression, there's no way out. Can't raise rates, can't cut rates, just like I said before. The big insolvent banks are in the same position as the central banks. They've gotten rid of the GLD, the inventory, so they cannot short the gold market anymore. They got almost $1 trillion in unrealized losses for bonds. They never say that those assets are treasury bonds. They can't sell them, Chris, because from convexity, it would force a snowball effect and a bond default. The big banks are loading up in gold. I did a consult call with a fund manager a few months ago. He said, Jim, every Wall Street bank has gold and they're doubling their gold. Every Wall Street bank has gold and they're doubling their gold. Number 11, China and Japan are supporting their currencies that are each in trouble. They buy more gold. They fortify their currency by buying gold. If you have a currency that's in trouble, buying gold strengthens it and reduces some of the stress. We have a geopolitical shift now, number 12, from west to east. And it means that the US, UK, Swiss banksters are going to be less in charge. And we've got to yield to the east with China, Russia, Persia. I'm telling you, this is a monumental shift. Number 13, The von Mises, they're often called the Austrian School of Economics. Well, that's their official name. I call it the von Mises School. But there's a von Mises corollary that when you're done ruining things with the paper global currency, you go to a metal. You don't go to a different paper. You go to metal, and that's gold. Number 14, this is really quite upsetting for us Americans to admit. The trust in all things American is now eroding and going away. I'm talking about banking, financial markets, economic statistics, warfare, news networks, social nonsense, and political fascism. We are now considered a goofy, neurotic, corrupt nation from our leadership. Number 15. This is a really favorite item of mine because it relates to the Andes and the mining projects. It was about 3 or 4 years ago, one by one, they closed down silver mining projects and blamed it on COVID risks to their workers. I thought, what a great pretext. They don't like the low price for silver, so they're going to close their mines for the fake pandemic. Wonderful. Hey, got news for people. 18 to 24 months to reopen those mines. Okay, while we're launching upward toward 50 in the silver price in the next few months, several months, 50, the mines will not be able to respond to meet the demand. We're going to continue up. Number 16, global debt as a ratio to GDP is now 330% globally. And I believe the United States is somewhere around 130 or 140%. There's a general rule of thumb, Chris. When your debt for a nation is over 100%, you have a depression and an economic financial failure. There is no exception in modern history. Number 17, a rapid introduction of digital currencies. We've already seen the Russian ruble digital. We've already seen the Chinese yuan digital. We're going to see more and more. Iran, Persia will come out with theirs. Number 18, on-demand liquidity of XRP will become a very big issue. It means if you want to use XRP, doesn't matter how much you need, on-demand liquidity will be there, and the BRICS nations announced their blockchain platforms. Number 19, the rising specter of war. If you ask some rum-dum in Wall Street, why is gold going up? He'll say credit crisis, the threat of price inflation, and war. Well, I got 17 other reasons. War is an important point. 19. Number 20 is controversial. It's dark money. I was told 7 or 8 years ago that Langley, and you know who I mean by Langley, that they own a couple of dozen containers in the Greek ports. Piraeus is their major, but the Greek ports. Every container, like the standard one you see on the back of a truck. Every container holds something like $357 billion in shrink-wrapped $100 bills. Do you really think Langley is going to leave it in the form of $100 bills sitting on Greek ports? Or do you think they're going to start gradually converting it to gold? Now, the narco money goes into cash. The narco money also goes into buying foreign banking systems. I'm going to make an outrageous comment, Chris. I believe Papa Bush and their $8 to $10 trillion in narco money bought the entire nation of Colombia. I heard a long time ago they bought the banking system. And I said, well, golly, what are you going to do with the other $7 trillion? The president of Colombia several years ago was the head of the Medellin cartel. Let that sink in. I have stories because I know I know a couple men who have Colombian sweethearts and wives. I get stories about Colombia. The Bush family bought the entire hospital sector. They bought the entire medical sector. They bought the entire banking sector. How hard would it be to buy the rest of that little country? It's known for its cocaine. And by the way, that war between the Medellin and the Cali cartels, long resolved, about 8 or 9 years ago. And I know what I'm talking about. The dark money is going to find gold. You hear a lot of arguments that Bitcoin is going up because the money's not going into gold. And I say, well, are you nuts? Are you a lunatic? It's going into both. There's a lot of dark money. Where do you think the Mexican drug money is going to go? You think they're going to invest in more oil properties? You think they're going to buy more ports? Sorry, the Chinese bought them all. The Mexicans are going to go to gold. They're going to go to big gold bars. All right, I mentioned the revised Operation Sandman. 20 countries at least, 2 trillion at least, 2 years at least. We've got the longest gold bull market in history coming. Get on board, and if you're dumb enough to sell at 2,500, you're going to be regretting it when it's 3,000. If you're dumb enough to sell silver at 32, you're going to regret it when it's 48. Don't sell. We've got Fibonacci at work in silver, not in gold. Fibonacci in silver, 10, 20, 30, 50, 80, 130. If you think 130 is an outrageous figure, get back to me in the year 2026. I greatly enjoy, Chris, being told an effing idiot. I was told that I was an effing idiot in 2000, late 6 and early 7, when I said Lehman and Fannie Mae were going to go bankrupt and fail. I was told I was an effing idiot in 2008 when I said we're going to 0%. I was told that I was an effing idiot in 2011 when I said we're going to do the same thing that Japan did and do quantitative easing, buying our own bonds. I was told I was an effing idiot in 2015 when I said there's going to be a gold trade note, might go by a different name. It's going to come out of the Eurasian trade zone. It's called the BRICS. It's called the gold token. So you want to call me an idiot? Fine. I've got a brain trust behind me from my good, solid emotional IQ. There are 7 of us. 2 have been murdered. Okay? 1 murdered and 1 I highly suspect was murdered. I got a brain trust. And, you know, I feel very fortunate, Chris. I have this group of colleagues. One guy is an information expert. One guy is an expert on COMEX and FOMC announcements and economic statistics and a whole lot of other things. And another one is an expert in finance internationally. I've got another one who's kind of a research arm. He was a research arm for the vaccine, for the pandemic that didn't exist, for immune system, for artificial intelligence, for the Ukraine war. I've got a lot of colleagues who support me and help me out. So it's really hard to fool the 7 of us combined. And I got to mention because it's an obligation from my heart that if it weren't for the aid that I've received, principally from Christians, I would have closed this down in 2020. I would not have continued. I got more aid yesterday, and it lifts my spirits. They're wonderful people. And in addition to the Christian crowd, there are the truth warriors. Jim, you're spouting the truth. You're on a soapbox. You're opposing corruption. You're telling the truth, and you're being harmed. I'm going to help you. That's just great. That's just great. So, I'm under assault, Chris. I've got actually some well